everybody. Welcome to the New to the Game podcast. I'm Chris Olson, and this is Ben Schneider. Today, we're
What
going to
is
be
up?
talking about what's up, buddy? Today, we're going to be talking about KPIs. If you've never heard that term before, a KPI is a key performance indicator, which is a data point that you want to track in your business. We're going to talk about the top 7 KPIs that we think are most important to track and why you should be tracking them. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how you can get a spreadsheet from us and some more information and some training on how to do this correctly. But if you don't know the main data points in your business, it makes it really hard to make decisions about what you should be doing. So, Ben, do you want to talk a little bit about why you track KPIs in your business and jump right into the data points that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, yeah, guys, KPIs, a key performance indicator. Those words say a lot. Key, it is something that is critical. It is important. Performance, it is a measurable of your performance. And an indicator, it indicates something. It has a story to tell behind it. So, looking at your KPIs is one of the most foundational, critical areas of your business. And honestly, right now, being able to understand why it's super important to start tracking some of the most granular, basic things within your company are going to have an immense impact down the road in the future of your company when you want to be able to look back and look at some historical trends and things of that nature. But yeah, so basically what we're going to cover is some of the high level data points that are just super helpful to track. And honestly, you might find yourself in a place where you're like tracking these numbers and they don't really make sense as to why you're tracking them. I think for the most of them, you'll understand pretty clearly after we explain them. But again, the goal here is for you to be able to measure your performance as a company. This is the way to essentially remove some of the emotion out of how you're doing as a company and being able to actually look at the math, the data driven points that say, okay, this is how many sales that we made right now. This is how many appointments I've run. This is how good of a salesperson I can be. And again, KPIs, you can get super deep with these things. The goal is not for us to give you the absolute deep dive on this stuff. The goal is to give you a nice foundational level understanding of what KPIs are and how you can use them in your business right now, but also how by using them in your business and tracking them in your business right now is going to dramatically improve your ability to make decisions in the future as well. So,
Yeah.
Chris has brought up a few. We were talking a little bit about like what are the absolute most important KPIs a new business could review. And I figured that it would make sense, Chris, if you want to go ahead and just kind of throw out some of those. What we'll do is we'll go down the list, each one. We'll talk about each data point, and we'll basically give you a high level explanation of why you should start tracking these numbers today and what those numbers actually represent as you're tracking them.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. So I'm just going to read down the whole list. Some of these are going to sound familiar to you if you've ever had a business or started a business. Some of them you're going to hear as kind of buzzwords in the entrepreneurship space, but some of them you might not be so familiar with. So we're going to talk about each one kind of at a simple level. So we have number of leads, that's inbound leads into your business. We have number of appointments or like sales appointments. We have number of sales, meaning you actually sold something to your client. We have total sales dollars, meaning the amount of stuff that you sold. We have gross profit, net profit, and then your closing rate or closing percentage. So that's 7 of the top data points that if you don't already know what these are off the top of your head, you probably need to figure it out. So for the first one, Ben, you want to talk about number of leads?
Yeah. So, as Chris mentioned earlier, a lead, really what this represents is an inbound lead. This is a lead that reached out to you. It is a prospect. It is a potential client. It is your grandmother that wants you to fix her roof. Like it is whoever, but someone that has reached out to you and said, hey, I am interested in your service. Can you help me? You can qualify these leads. You can measure them based upon like, are they actually a good lead? Like I own a sod installation company and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. If a guy in South Carolina reaches out to me to mow my lawn, mow his lawn, I'm not going to qualify that person as a lead. I might still track it, but I'm not going to qualify that person as a lead. Again, these are people that are interested in buying your service. It does not matter if they can afford it. It does not matter if they're like the perfect fit for you. It's just someone that has reached out to you interested in the services that you offer. The reason we track
Yep.
these leads are super important to be able to actually know the performance one of your marketing efforts. Like, what you're doing actually working? Is your ad campaign working? Is your outbound, like knocking on doors, is any of that working? But it also gives you kind of a history of your business. Like, for example, knowing that I'm a seasonal company, it's really helpful to be able to look at each element of, okay, I know that in August of 2023 we had relatively slower lead flow, but it's also important to recognize that in May, I have much higher lead flow because a lot of people are thinking about their lawn. There's a lot of stories that information can tell. So the most simple thing you can do, I would recommend it on a week by week basis, like week 1, week 2, or January 1st through January 7th. Like, this is how many leads we received during this period, and tracking that throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to add on to that, I mean, it's one of the things that we'll talk about when we get more deep into this in our courses and in our Skool group is number of leads is one of the foundational data points, because you have no idea how many of any of these other data points that you need for your business without knowing your number of leads. I mean, if you know how many sales appointments you're booking each month, but you don't know how many leads it takes to get to that number of appointments, that's pretty challenging. So it's kind of a main data point that will lead to everything else. I mean, that's not supposed to be a joke, but it is kind of a play on words. So, because if you have your number of leads, that helps you figure out the number of leads that you need for the number of appointments that you need for your number of sales to hit your revenue goals. So, a lot of these points
Yep,
are connected, and I feel like leads are one of the foundational ones that kind of leads to everything else. Man, I made that
100%.
joke
And
twice on
then
accident.
it was a good one, man.
Yeah,
So the
the
next
dad
one that
jokes.
we've
The
got
dad jokes
here,
are coming out.
yeah, that's on you, man. So the next point that I'm going to dive into is number of appointments. Again, this one might be somewhat self-explanatory, but again, it is the number of leads that actually converted to an appointment. Those numbers often can be somewhat similar, but you'll start to recognize historically that there's a trend where you're going to get more leads than you're going to get appointments. The number of appointments is actually how many people did you speak with, and I'm not just talking about phone calls. I'm talking about, in our world, it would be more often than not, it's going to be how many people did you actually visit on their property. You could even add an extra KPI in there if you wanted to, and how many of those people did you actually prepare an estimate for. And it's a way
Mm-hmm.
for you to start to see what, not only what your closing ratio is, which we're going to get into, but also how many jobs are you actually, like, how many of your leads are qualified enough to where they convert
Mm-hmm.
into an appointment. And then when you have the number of appointments and how many of those appointments convert into sales, you start to get a little bit more of, okay, I know that I need X number of appointments to be able to do X number goal or whatever you have. But again, we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting at the latter half of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's absolutely a super good point, Ben. That like it's so interesting to me how related a lot of these data points are. Like, you can have a ton of leads but not get a lot of appointments, or you can have what feels like not enough leads, but all of them are such good leads that they all turn into appointments. So when you start
Or
tracking all
it's
these
like
different data
a,
points, yeah,
yeah, I was going to say, or it's just an indicator that your lead intake is awful and you're allowing a lot of leads to fall off the map because you're not organized enough. So that is an
100%,
indicator. And
yeah,
again, the indicators highlight the overall big picture, a measure of performance. And then it's your job and your responsibility to go deeper from that point and find out, why is this thing indicating this story? And then you can
yep.
work yourself from there.
Yeah, because each one of these data points we're talking about, I mean, they all are interconnected. So if you're not
Yep.
making enough revenue to pay your bills, then it might be that you don't have enough leads, or it might be that you have enough leads but you're not converting enough to appointments, or it might be that you're converting enough to appointments but you're not selling enough work at those appointments. So it's really necessary as a business owner to track each one of these items, which we're going to talk about more. We're
Yeah.
kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but they're all
Yeah.
so interconnected. So let's jump to the next one. So
So,
the next one,
yeah.
we talked about leads, talked about appointments. The next one is total number of sales, and then total sales dollars. So do you want to talk about those two?
Yeah. And of course, obviously, these are, as with everyone else, they're all super interconnected. Your number of
Yep.
sales is how many jobs did you sell? I sold 10 jobs this week. I sold 5 jobs this week. I sold 1 job this week. How many jobs did you sell? Then you also are going to look at your total sales dollars, like the actual dollar amount of each of those sales. Let's say I sold a $5,000 job, or a 10,000, or 100,000. What is the actual number that is attached, as far as, like, this will ultimately lead to gross revenue for my company, because this is what the client is paying me for the service that I sold them. Both of these. So again, bridging the gap, number of sales is really, really important, because again, that's going to be one of the number one things that will help tie together the importance of your number of leads as well as the number of appointments. The total sales dollars isn't as much in there. That's more about a financial metric that's really helpful. It's going to allow you to
Mm-hmm.
indicate, okay, average job size. It's going to allow you to indicate, okay, what is our expected cash flow over a certain period. And that's there. You can learn a lot from just the total number of sales dollars. But the number of sales, in my opinion, is one that I would really, really emphasize, because if you can start to know how many people you are selling out of the number of appointments that you ran, out of the number of leads that you generated, that complete story, those like 3 KPIs tied together, is
Mm-hmm.
going to provide a massive amount of information. And I will say, one of the cool elements about having those each tied together is that when you have 3 KPIs, like just 3 KPIs that are all interconnected, what it's going to lead to is your ability to actually begin to have foundational data that will lead to you being able to have more KPIs down the road without having to track anything. And then all you have to do
Yep.
is do math equation to get yourself there. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool as you start this foundational piece, because they just are going to naturally lead to more, again, without you
Mm-hmm.
starting from scratch.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about that because we talked about these data points ahead of time before we hit record, and I realized that our one of the last ones on our list is closing rate and closing percentage, and really, it's not really something you track as much as it's the result of an equation that you do by taking your number of leads, number of appointments, number of sales, and just doing divisions. So if
Yep.
you take your number of sales and your number of leads and your number of appointments, you can talk about your lead conversion to job to sale, and lead conversion to appointments, and appointment to sales. And you can have your closing ratio as either one of those. Really, what I would say is my closing ratio would be my number of appointments versus my number of sales, not necessarily my number of leads versus number of sales. You can go back and look at that if you want, but really, a lead is a certain amount, a qualified lead. But if you don't get an appointment from that lead, then they maybe weren't as qualified as you were hoping. So I would really look at how many appointments actually result in a sale, and that is your closing percentage. So if you go out to 5 appointments a week and you only close 2, then your closing ratio is 2 out of 5. Or if you go out to 100 appointments a month and you close 25 sales, you've got a 25% closing rate. And you can argue all day about what a quote unquote good closing rate is in your industry. But the reality is once again, once you have that data, you really just need to look at, if I need more sales, do I need more leads, or do I need to close more of the leads I already have? And that's what looking at all this data allows you to do.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
it's helpful too, because as you're looking at this, like an example of just a pure baseline number. Let's just say that you sold, your business started off in year one, you sold $5,000, meaning your business is not very good. In year two, you want to double that, meaning your business is still not very good, but we just want to double it. Let's say that's what you're after. What you're going to do
yep.
is you're going to say, okay, I knew I had 10 leads last year. And I know that out of those 10 leads, 5 of those leads actually converted into appointments, meaning I went out there and I converted those leads to an appointment. And then I only sold one of those, and that one job was $5,000. Now, you can look at this 5 different ways. I mean, one way, say, okay, you know what? In order to be able to replicate that, I need to generate 20 more leads, which means you're going to be putting in a marketing effort. You're going to do a marketing effort to generate 20 more leads so that you can go on 10 appointments so you can sell 2 people. Or you could say, all right, we definitely did not do as many appointments as I wanted to. That means I'm going to make a lead intake remedy, or develop my
Mm-hmm.
sales process a little bit more thoroughly. So that way I'm actually visiting more people on site. So I'm increasing my number of potential sales opportunities. Or you could
Yep.
say, okay, well, I'm just a terrible salesperson. So I need to make sales process and sales training efforts so that the number of appointments that I run, I can actually sell more. So without generating more leads or without booking more appointments, I can still sell more with what I have. And again, you can look at it a ton of different ways, but this, again, it creates a very healthy framework for you to be able to direct your efforts in an intentional way that allows you to be able to make decisions within your company.
Yeah. And totally agree. And it's just always interesting to me how these are such basic data points, but tracking them lets you make so many different decisions within your company. Do I need more leads? Do I need more sales? Do I need to increase my closing percentage? Do I need to sell my jobs at a higher rate? I mean, you can get so granular and so detailed in this, and that's what we're going to be doing in our Skool group and in our course that we're working on. Ben, mainly me helping a little bit, we're developing a business financial literacy and data tracking course that's going to dive really deep into this. That's Ben's baby, and he's spearheading it. So we're going to be putting that into our Skool group and making that available soon. And that's free, by the way. Our Skool group's free, just in case you were wondering. And we're just super excited about that. So,
Yeah.
Ben, the last couple of points we were going to talk about are really closely related to job costing. So we're going to talk about
Yep.
gross profit and net profit, which is less about our sales process and more about our production process. So do you just want to give like a high level short version of like what job costing is if people aren't familiar with that term, and then why it's so important? And then we can talk about those last two KPIs.
Job costing is the process of you looking at the total amount that you spent towards delivering a job. That's going to equate to cost of goods sold. So, what is cost of goods sold? That is labor and material at the end of the day. You can get really granular with it, but I'm just going to keep it base
Mhm.
level. Labor, material. How much did you pay your employees or yourself to go out there and actually deliver the service? And then how much in material did you spend, whether it be towards, like in Chris's industry, it would be spending on cleaning chemicals or something like that, or fuel might be a cost of goods sold for him. Whereas in
Mhm.
my industry, it's okay, how many pallets of sod did we purchase? What do we spend towards those pallets? What did we spend on soil? And then what do we pay our subcontractors to do the labor of that project? That is
Yep.
going to give you the high level information of your gross profit. The gross profit is all of the money that is left over. If a client paid you $5,000 and you spent $2,500 to be able to deliver that project in both labor and material, then you have $2,500 left remaining in your bank account, assuming you never did an ounce of business for the rest of your life ever again. You have 2,500 bucks in gross profit, or a 50% gross profit margin. But yeah, those
Yep.
are kind of two numbers there, but that's how you get to both.
Yeah. And the last one's net profit. So you want to talk about why that $2,500 might not actually be what you pay yourself at the end of the week?
But I made so much money, man. Where did it all go?
Yeah.
The question
I've got a
everyone
50, I've
asks at
got a
the end of the
50%
day.
gross profit, but how did I do $500,000 in business this year, Ben, at a 50% gross profit? But at the end of the year, I still only have $37 in my bank account.
Well, at least you can pay your overdraft fees with that $37. Um, so with your net profit is the net. The net is basically, picture a giant net that is catching everything at the end of the day. All the money that drips down the line through your business, through your profit and loss sheet from top to bottom. It is all of that
Mm-hmm.
money gradually getting, like, think about like those sifters that they use when they're finding gold. All of the bigger chunks, the labor, the material. Then you have your operational expenses. Those are going to be the things, or your overhead, as a lot of people like to call it. Those are going to be the things that you spend towards keeping your business functional. It could be, for some
Yep.
people, it could be like your truck payment. It could be your insurance costs. It could be just like the payroll if you have like any office staff, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it's a way to be able to calculate all of that. And sometimes, depending upon where you're at in business, most of the time your pay, your owner pay, or really your owner salary, your CEO salary, as you might call it, is going to be pulled out of overhead as well. Net
Yep.
profit is the money that ideally is meant to be left in the bank account at the end of the day. If you did not touch your business again for the next 6 months, but you were still generating business, you were still doing the things, but again, you just had this number of dollars floating at the bottom, that's going to be your net profit. And then again, the net profit percentage, or the net profit margin, is going to be just a simple math equation to determine, do I have 10% of my total revenue, or 20%, or 5%, or negative 7%, like I found out at one point. That helps you measure
Been there.
your net profit.
Yeah, been there. Yeah, and that's a lack of understanding on these numbers is where you get people that, like, you'll hear business owners that will like talk about this, where they are like, "Hey, I did $27,000 in revenue this month. I should have had a 50% gross profit, but by the time I paid my insurance, my licensing, my bonding, my truck payments, my equipment payments, my payment on my excavator, my office payment, my office manager's salary, my computer payments, my tech payments, my software payments, like by the time you paid all your operational expenses, you get down to the end of the wire and your net profit is zero, or 2 or 3%
Yep.
positive or negative. And that's why you have these people that will start a business. and they feel like, okay, I'm making great money, I'm putting lots of money in, I'm cashing the checks. But then when it comes time at the end of the month to actually cash out whatever's left, there's nothing left. And
Yeah.
that's where you get people that feel like they're charging the most they can charge, but then they end up with no money left. So you have to have a good understanding of your gross profit, your net profit, and what you need to end up with a net profit that is actually enough to make it worth your time to run your company. And like
Yeah.
Ben said, that could be before or after you get paid. So it might be that you have a business that pays you $100,000 a year, but then there's no net profit left. So at the end of the day, what you really have with that business is a job that you own, because the
Yep.
company itself is not profitable. You're just making enough money that you can pay yourself a paycheck. But if you
Yeah. And
want to have a
it's
business
gonna
that is actually successful, you need to have a business that pays the owner or pays the CEO or pays the manager, but then still has a profit at the end of the day. And that's where a lot of people get lost and stuck.
Yeah, and that's why it's a KPI. It's a KPI because
Mm-hmm.
what is it indicating about your business? And again, this isn't an emotional situation. This isn't, if I look at the business and I know that I'm generating, I don't know, 2% net profit, I might walk away from that in a kind of disappointed fashion. But again, that is an indicator. It's telling a story. I might be spending too much on my operational costs within my business. Maybe I need to lay a person off. Maybe I need to minimize the spend in some certain area. Maybe I'm embellishing a little bit too much on my luxuries in the business or something like that. But then, I just have spent too much in an area that I need to spend less in. But another area would just be that I increase my profitability on my projects. That could be a production problem or it could be a sales problem. But again, these numbers tell a story, and being able to determine
Mm-hmm.
what that story is and then how to be able to navigate that story is a huge part of why we track these KPIs in the first place. This is lesson really and truly, like Chris, this is lesson one. This is the first foundational
Yep.
lesson. This is just like what, like, you were tracking these KPIs. Lesson two is actually, once you have had somewhat of a history of tracking these KPIs, then we can dive into actually knowing what to do with them, actually knowing how to
Yep.
make data driven decisions within the company. But then also, I mean, maybe lesson like zero on this is the whole part that you mentioned. It's the course that I'm developing, which is going to be on
Yep.
financial literacy. It's being able to actually start to understand, one, how to pull this information, but two, knowing where to look for this information, knowing like
Mm-hmm.
what some of the terminology around this information means, knowing once you have all of this information, knowing, okay, how do I build a budget in a way that is makes sense based upon the size of my company as it is right now. And then you can start to be able to you're creating a pattern essentially of always being able to reflect on these things, the indicators, to tell you what you need to do if you want to, let's just say you have a goal in mind. These indicators are going to be what allow you to be able to know how to deconstruct that goal in a way that actually takes you where you want to go, as opposed to leaving it completely ambiguous and just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. Because you can run a business that way. You can. Should you? Does it make sense? Is it the right decision? Is it actually going to serve you? Try.
Yeah.
I would
I
advise
mean,
not trying and take some
yeah.
time and do this, and it goes a really long way.
I mean, both of us know business owners that have been running a company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years out of like a spiral bound notebook and a Dell computer from 1997 and somehow are still in business. But it doesn't mean
Yep.
that you have a profitable, scalable, successful company that is going to be consistent. It just means
Yep.
that at a certain point you got lucky. Because if you're running a company that isn't based on data driven decisions, then at a certain point you're either going to go out of business because you got unlucky, or you're going to be successful because you got lucky. Um, but if you have all these data points and you have all this information to use and make good educated decisions, then you can truly grow and build a business that is actually what you want it to be. Awesome. Well, I think we're already kind of over our time. So, really quick, if you want to learn more about this, like we've talked about in this episode, Ben is building out a course on financial literacy, and it's going to include a lot of discussion about these kind of things, about KPI tracking, about business budgeting, basically about how to understand, record, track, and make decisions based off the data in your business. We're also working on some other courses. We're going to have a course on how to get your first 10 or 20 clients in a new business, and then a second level, kind of higher level course on the crash course in business marketing. especially for home service contractors. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is going to be applicable to any business, but obviously, me and Ben have a niche of being pretty knowledgeable about home service businesses. So we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to be talking about how to build offers, how to find your ideal clients, and lots of other stuff. If you're interested in following along with this, we have a group on Skool. That's Skool. We're building out a community for young aspiring contractors and home service business owners. If you're new to the industry and looking to get started, if you're just starting a business and want extra help, or if you have an existing business that you're a little bit lost in, we are super excited to have you and have you part of the community. We are also on Instagram, and this podcast is findable on pretty much every podcast platform out there. We're still new at this and we're figuring it out as we go, but as of today, we are on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, and 5 or 6 other apps I wasn't even aware existed until we started doing this. But our main kind of headquarters location is going to be on Skool because we want to build out a
Yep.
community where people can interact with each other, find support, get to know each other, and really help find solutions and help with their businesses or how to get started. So come find us on Skool. The link to the Skool group will be in the show notes, and we would love to have you.
Yeah, guys, hop in. We are early to this, and that means that Chris and I, if you interact with either of us, I mean, like we're at a point right now where we just want you to have as much valuable as possible, and we're just giving it away for free because we just want you to be able to benefit from this. Um,
Yeah,
who knows what that will lead to? But again, what we want right now is you to have as much valuable information as possible, learning from the lessons that we have already learned down in our past. So jump into it. We're going to make this so it's worth your while. We're not here to waste your time. We want this to be something that's very, very real, tangible, and consumable. So, yeah, guys, jump into it. We would love to see you there, and we can't wait to interact with you on a more direct basis on Skool as well as other platforms as you reach out to us.
awesome. All right, well, we'll wrap this up then. Come find us on Skool. Come find us on Instagram. If you like the podcast, hit follow. And if you like it a lot, leave a review on Apple or Spotify for us. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see y'all.